The coffee shop on the corner of 5th and Madison had seen better days. Its faded awning flapped in the autumn wind while inside, Sarah Chen wiped down the same counter she had cleaned 1,000 times before. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her uniform carried the lingering smell of burnt espresso and cinnamon rolls. The morning rush had ended, leaving only a handful of regulars scattered across the worn booths. Sarah moved between tables with practiced efficiency, refilling cups and clearing plates. Nobody looked at her twice. Nobody ever did. She was just another face in the endless stream of service workers that kept the city running. "More coffee, sweetie?" she asked an elderly man reading the newspaper. He grunted without looking up. Sarah filled his cup and moved on. What none of them knew, what none of them could possibly guess, was that the woman pouring their coffee had once been Captain Sarah Chen, one of the most decorated fighter pilots in the United States Air Force. Her hands, now holding a coffee pot, had once guided an F-22 Raptor through combat zones at speeds that would turn a normal person's vision black. Her calm demeanor, mistaken for simple contentment, was actually the unwavering composure of someone who had made life or death decisions at 30,000 feet. But that was 5 years ago. 5 years since the accident, 5 years since she walked away from the only life she had ever wanted. Sarah returned to the counter and began preparing for the lunch crowd. Her manager, Tommy, was in the back office doing paperwork. The lunch cook wouldn't arrive for another hour. It was just her and the quiet hum of the refrigerators. Her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. She ignored it. Probably another spam call. It buzzed again. And again, frowning, Sarah pulled out the phone. The number was blocked, but something about the persistent calling made her answer. "Hello? Is this Captain Sarah Chen?" The voice was male, clipped, official. Her heart skipped. Nobody had called her captain in years. "Who is this?" "Captain Chen, this is Colonel Morrison from Andrews Air Force Base. We have a situation." Sarah's hand tightened on the phone. "Colonel, I'm not in the service anymore. You have the wrong person. Ma'am, I'm aware of your status, but we need you. There's been an incident at Reagan National Airport." Through the coffee shop window, Sarah could see people on the street stopping, looking up at the sky. Several pulled out their phones, pointing and filming something she couldn't see from her angle. "What kind of incident?" she asked, her voice automatically shifting to the crisp tone of command she thought she had left behind. An F-22 was conducting a routine flyover for an air show when the pilot suffered a medical emergency. The aircraft is currently on autopilot, circling above the city with full fuel and a full weapons load. The pilot is unconscious, maybe worse. We've tried everything, but we can't establish proper control remotely. Sarah felt ice settle in her stomach. "Get another pilot up there." "We're trying, Captain. But here's the problem. The aircraft's systems are experiencing multiple failures. The backup pilot in pursuit can't establish a connection. The plane is heading toward restricted airspace in approximately 40 minutes. If it crosses that threshold, he didn't need to finish." Sarah knew exactly what would happen. They would shoot it down over the city rather than risk it hitting sensitive areas. Hundreds could die from the debris alone. "Why me?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "Because you're the only pilot within range who has experience with this specific aircraft and its systems. You were the test pilot for the update package this particular Raptor is running. You know its quirks better than anyone alive. And ma'am, you're the only one who might be able to talk someone through a manual override if it comes to that." Sarah looked around the coffee shop. The elderly man was still reading his paper. A young mother was trying to keep her toddler entertained. Tommy was humming off key in the back office. This was her world now. Safe. Predictable. Far from the sky that had once tried to kill her. "Captain Chen, I understand you've been through trauma. I read your file. I know what happened. But right now there's a pilot up there who might be dying, and a city full of people who have no idea they're in danger. I'm not ordering you because I can't, but I'm asking." Her hands were shaking. Sarah realized she was gripping the counter so hard her knuckles had turned white. The familiar weight of responsibility was settling on her shoulders like an old coat she had thrown in the back of the closet. "Where do you need me?" "There's a helicopter landing on the roof of the federal building, 3 blocks from your location in 8 minutes. It will take you to Andrews. We'll have everything you need waiting. I'll be there." Sarah ended the call and stood frozen for a moment. Through the window she could now see the contrail of the F-22, a white line scratching across the blue sky. Somewhere up there a pilot was in trouble. Her people. Her world. The one she had run from, Tommy, she called out, already untying her apron. I have to go. Family emergency. Tommy emerged from the office, confused. Now? Sarah, the lunch rush? I'm sorry. It's important. She didn't wait for his response. Sarah grabbed her jacket from the hook and pushed through the front door. The street was more crowded now, with people pointing at the sky and talking nervously. She could hear snippets of conversation. Is that a military plane? Why is it just circling? Do you think something's wrong? Sarah pushed through the crowd and started running. Her body remembered this, the urgent sprint to the flight line when the alarm sounded. Her lungs burned, but she didn't slow down. 3 blocks. The federal building loomed ahead. As she ran, the weight of 5 years of hiding began to lift. She had walked away from flying because the fear had become too much. Because watching her wingman die in front of her had broken something inside. Because every time she closed her eyes, she saw the flames and heard the screaming over the radio. But running away hadn't fixed anything. It had just made her someone who had run away. The federal building's plaza was being cleared by security. Sarah could hear the helicopter before she saw it. The familiar thump of rotor blades cutting through the air. It was descending toward the roof. A security guard stepped in front of her. Ma'am, you need to clear the area. I'm Captain Sarah Chen. That helicopter is for me. He spoke into his radio, listened, then stepped aside with wide eyes. Go ahead, Captain. Elevator to the top floor, then stairs to roof access. Sarah was already moving. The elevator took forever. When the doors finally opened on the top floor, she burst through and took the stairs 2 at a time. The roof access door was propped open, and she emerged into the wind and noise of the waiting helicopter. A young officer was there, headset in hand. He practically shoved it at her as she climbed aboard. Captain Chen, Colonel Morrison is on the line. Sarah strapped in as the helicopter lifted off. Below, the city spread out in all directions. Somewhere up there, invisible from this altitude, an F-22 was running out of time. She put on the headset. Colonel, I'm en route. Give me everything you know. The helicopter streaked across the Washington skyline while Colonel Morrison's voice crackled through Sarah's headset. She stared out at the city below, watching buildings blur past as her mind shifted into a gear she hadn't used in years. The pilot is Lieutenant Marcus Webb, 28 years old, 3 years of active service, Morrison explained. He was executing the final pass of a practice run when he stopped responding. Last communication was a brief mention of chest pain, then nothing. Sarah processed the information with clinical detachment. Emotions would come later, if there was a later. Right now, she needed facts. What's the aircraft status? Autopilot engaged and holding a circular pattern at 15,000 feet. All attempts at remote override have failed. The computer is locked in a safety loop. It won't respond to ground commands, and the backup systems aren't acknowledging our signals. Because of the retrofit, Sarah said immediately. The update package I tested had a fail-safe protocol. If the pilot becomes unresponsive and manual override is attempted from outside, the system assumes hostile takeover and locks everything down. It's designed to prevent enemy cyber attacks. There was a pause on the line. Jesus, we didn't think of that. Most people wouldn't. It was a theoretical scenario when I was testing it. The chances of a pilot becoming incapacitated at the exact moment someone tries remote access seemed astronomically small. Sarah watched the Potomac River snake below them. I recommended additional protocols, but they were deemed too complex for standard operation. Can you break through it? From the ground? No. The system would need someone physically in the cockpit to reset the security protocols. But Colonel, even if I could get up there, Lieutenant Webb is still in the pilot's seat. I can't fly the plane with him unconscious in the way. We've got medical teams standing by. If you can get to the aircraft, we might be able to extract him while you take control. Sarah's jaw tightened. The idea was insane. Mid-air extraction from a fighter jet going 500 miles per hour? It had never been done before, not like this. You're talking about a maneuver that exists only in theory papers. You wrote one of those papers, Captain. She had. 6 years ago, a thought experiment on emergency pilot extraction during flight. It had been theoretical work. The kind of thing pilots discussed over drinks but never expected to actually attempt. The variables were too numerous, the risks too high. That was just math on paper, Colonel. The real-world application is our only option, Morrison interrupted. Captain, that F-22 is carrying AIM-120 missiles and a full ammunition load. In 32 minutes, it enters the restricted zone over federal buildings. At that point, my orders are clear. We either bring it down over the Potomac or let it get shot down over the city. The helicopter began its descent toward Andrews Air Force Base. Sarah could see the runways below, the organized chaos of a military installation in crisis mode. Emergency vehicles were positioned along the tarmac. Personnel were running between buildings. This was real. This was happening. I need complete tactical control, Sarah said. No committee decisions, no second guessing. If I'm doing this, I do it my way. You'll have it. And Colonel, I'm going to need gear that still fits and a very fast briefing on what's changed in 5 years. Already waiting for you. The helicopter touched down hard. Sarah was moving before the skids fully settled, jumping out and running toward a hangar where a group of officers stood waiting. The wind from the rotors whipped her hair as she sprinted, and for the first time in 5 years, she felt alive in a way that had nothing to do with fear. A female officer met her halfway carrying a flight suit and gear bag. Captain Chen? I'm Lieutenant Rodriguez. I've got your size from your service records. Everything's ready. How current are the records? Sarah asked, grabbing the bag. Updated this morning from your last medical file on record. The fit should be close. They ran together toward the hangar. Inside, a command center had been set up with monitors showing the circling F-22 from multiple angles. Ground radar tracked its path. Communications equipment filled several tables. At least 20 people were working frantically, but they all stopped when Sarah entered. Captain on deck, someone called out. As you were, Sarah said automatically, the old habits flooding back. I need a changing area in 2 minutes. Rodriguez pointed to a side room. Sarah didn't waste time. She stripped off her coffee-stained civilian clothes and pulled on the flight suit. It was tight across the shoulders, a reminder that 5 years of serving coffee hadn't maintained the fitness levels she'd once had. But it would work. The gear bag contained everything else she needed. Boots, gloves, helmet, survival vest. Sarah's hands moved through the routine of gearing up without conscious thought. Muscle memory from 1,000 pre-flight preparations took over. When she emerged, Colonel Morrison was waiting. He was older than she expected, maybe late 50s, with the weathered look of someone who had spent decades in military service. His eyes assessed her quickly. Captain Chen, thank you for coming. What's the plan? Morrison gestured to the largest monitor, which showed a schematic of the F-22's flight path. We've got a modified C-130 standing by. It's equipped with a ramp deployment system. The theory is we match altitude and speed with the F-22, deploy the ramp, and you jump. Sarah stared at him. You want me to jump from a cargo plane onto a fighter jet traveling at cruising speed. The F-22 is on autopilot holding at 400 knots. We can match that. You'll have a specialized suit with control surfaces for micro-adjustments during descent. Once you land on the aircraft, you'll need to access the canopy emergency release, get inside, and take control, while Lieutenant Webb is still in the seat. We'll have a medical team on standby. Once you're in control, you can bring the aircraft to a lower altitude where we can attempt an extraction, or you land it with him still aboard. Sarah studied the schematic. Every pilot instinct she had was screaming that this was impossible. The margin for error was non-existent. Wind shear, turbulence, a single miscalculation, and she would miss the aircraft entirely or hit it hard enough to damage critical systems. Or die, that was also an option. Captain, I won't lie to you, Morrison said quietly. The chance of success is low, but it's higher with you than with anyone else. You know that aircraft. You understand its systems. And according to your file, you have more hours in extreme flight conditions than any active pilot in our current roster. Sarah looked at the monitor showing the circling F-22. Somewhere inside that cockpit was Lieutenant Webb, possibly dying, definitely running out of time. Beyond him was a city full of people who would never know how close they came to disaster if this went wrong. I need to see the jumpsuit and review the aircraft systems one more time, she said, and I want to talk to whoever's flying the C-130. If I'm trusting my life to their flying, I need to know they can hold steady in conditions that would make most pilots quit. Major Patterson is your pilot. Air Force Special Operations, 15 years of experience. She's the best we have. A woman approached from across the hangar. She was compact and muscular, with short-cropped hair and the confident walk of someone who had earned every step. Captain Chen, heard you were coming out of retirement for this. Not retirement. Hiatus. Sarah extended her hand. Can you hold a cargo plane steady enough for me to jump onto a fighter jet? Major Patterson's grip was firm. Ma'am, I can hold it steady enough for you to walk across if needed. But I'll be honest, the turbulence from both aircraft will make this tricky. You'll have maybe a 3-second window when everything aligns. 3 seconds. Sarah calculated the distances, the speeds, the 1,000 things that could go wrong. That's optimistic, yes ma'am. But optimism is kind of required for this job. Despite everything, Sarah almost smiled. She looked at Morrison. Show me everything. The specialized jumpsuit looked more like something from a science fiction movie than actual military equipment. Sarah examined it carefully while a technician named Davis explained its features. The suit was matte black with aerodynamic surfaces built into the arms and legs, small control surfaces that would allow her to make minute adjustments during the fall. We've never actually tested this in real combat conditions, Davis admitted, helping her into the suit over her flight gear. The prototypes worked in simulations, but theory and reality are two different things, Sarah finished. She had heard that phrase 1,000 times during test pilot school, usually right before something went spectacularly wrong. What's the failure rate in simulation? Davis hesitated. 30%. So I've got a 7 in 10 chance of making it onto the aircraft without dying. Those are better odds than playing Russian roulette. Sarah pulled the suit's sleeves tight. Not really the comparison I was hoping for, Davis. Across the hangar, Major Patterson was conducting her own pre-flight checks on the C-130. The cargo plane sat on the tarmac like a gray whale. Its 4 turboprop engines quiet for now but ready to roar to life. The rear ramp was open, revealing the cavernous interior that Sarah would soon be jumping from. Colonel Morrison approached with a tablet. Latest update on the F-22's position. It's completed 8 more circles. Still on autopilot. Still no response from Lieutenant Webb. We're picking up irregular transponder signals that suggest his vital signs monitor might be active, which means he could still be alive. Could be. 2 words that carried a universe of uncertainty. I need 5 minutes with the system specifications, Sarah said. If I'm going to reset that security protocol, I need to remember the exact sequence. Morrison led her to a computer terminal where the F-22's technical documents were displayed. Sarah sat down and began reading, her eyes moving rapidly across screens of data. The information came back faster than she expected. Her mind, which had spent 5 years memorizing coffee orders and shift schedules, suddenly snapped into focus like a camera lens adjusting to perfect clarity. The security override required a 16-digit code entered through the backup panel behind the pilot's seat. The panel could only be accessed from inside the cockpit. The code changed based on a time lock algorithm that Sarah had helped develop. She would need to calculate the current code based on the date, time, and aircraft identification number. I'll need paper and a calculator, she said. Someone handed her both. Sarah began working through the algorithm, her hand moving across the paper with equations and numbers that would look like gibberish to anyone else. But to her they were a map. A path back into a system she had once known as well as her own heartbeat. 3 minutes later, she had the code. Got it, she announced, standing up. But Colonel, there's something you need to understand. Even if I make it onto the aircraft, even if I get inside and reset the system, flying that plane with Lieutenant Webb still in the seat will be almost impossible. The control stick is between his legs. The throttle is on his left. I'll have no leverage, no proper position. Can you do it? Sarah thought about the question. Not could she theoretically do it, but could she actually pull it off when her life and countless others depended on it? When she was exhausted from a jump that might break bones? When she was fighting turbulence in an aircraft that wouldn't respond the way she needed? I don't know, she said honestly. But I'll try. Morrison nodded. That was all anyone could ask. Time to move, Major Patterson called out. We've got 19 minutes before that F-22 enters the red zone. The team moved with coordinated urgency. Sarah finished securing the jumpsuit while technicians attached her communication equipment and parachute. The parachute was a backup, something that would only deploy if she missed the F-22 entirely. If that happened, she would have about 3 seconds to pull the cord before falling too far. Remember, Davis said, making final adjustments to her helmet. The suit's control surfaces respond to arm movements. Keep your body straight during initial descent, then use your arms to guide yourself toward the target. The heads-up display in your helmet will show your trajectory and distance to target. What about wind shear? The computer will compensate automatically, but you'll feel it. Don't fight it too hard. Trust the suit, trust a prototype, trust mathematics and engineering that had never been proven in real conditions. Trust that she still remembered how to do this after 5 years away. Sarah walked toward the C-130 with Major Patterson. The other woman's expression was calm, professional, but Sarah could see the tension in her shoulders. This was unprecedented for everyone involved. "Ever done anything this crazy?" Sarah asked as they climbed the ramp into the aircraft's belly. "Flew into a hurricane once to drop supplies," Patterson said. "This is probably crazier." "Probably?" The hurricane didn't have missiles. The C-130's interior was stripped down for the mission. No cargo, no seats, just open space and the equipment Sarah would need. A crew of 4 was already aboard, checking systems and preparing for takeoff. They all looked young, eager, terrified. Sarah strapped into a jump seat and waited while the engine started. The familiar vibration of military aircraft came through the floor. Her heart was racing, adrenaline singing through her veins. This was the feeling she had run from. The electric anticipation before doing something that could kill you if anything went wrong. But this time it didn't feel like fear. It felt like coming home. The C-130 taxied onto the runway and immediately began its takeoff roll. The acceleration pressed Sarah back into her seat. She watched through the small window as the ground fell away and they climbed into the afternoon sky. "Captain Chen, this is Control." Colonel Morrison's voice came through her helmet. "We have visual confirmation on the F-22. It's maintaining its circular pattern at 15,000 feet. We're vectoring you toward intercept." "Copy that," Sarah replied. "What's Lieutenant Webb's status?" "Still no communication. Vital signs are inconclusive," which meant he might be dead. Sarah pushed that thought away. She couldn't afford distraction. Major Patterson's voice came over the intercom. "Captain, we're at 10,000 feet and climbing. ETA to intercept point is 7 minutes. Wind conditions are moderate but variable. I'll get you as stable as possible, but expect some turbulence." "Understood." The aircraft continued climbing. Sarah stood and moved to the rear ramp where 2 crew members were preparing the deployment system. One of them, a kid who looked barely old enough to shave, kept glancing at her with wide eyes. "First time on an operation like this?" Sarah asked him. "Yes, ma'am. First time on any operation, really. I graduated tech school 3 months ago." Sarah remembered being that young, that new. It felt like a lifetime ago. "What's your name?" "Airman Cho, ma'am." "Well, Airman Cho, I need you to stay focused. When that ramp opens, things are going to get loud and chaotic. Don't freeze up. Just do your job." "Yes, ma'am." He swallowed hard. "Ma'am, is it true you used to test these systems?" "I tested the aircraft systems, not the jumping onto a moving fighter jet systems. That's new for all of us. But you're still doing it." Sarah checked her equipment one more time. "Someone has to." The C-130 leveled off at 15,000 feet. Through the small windows, Sarah could see nothing but blue sky and distant clouds. Somewhere out there, the F-22 was circling, waiting. 5 minutes to intercept, Major Patterson announced. "Beginning approach pattern now." The aircraft banked and Sarah felt her stomach shift. She moved to the edge of the ramp area and looked down at the release mechanism. When that ramp opened, she would have exactly 3 seconds to jump, orient herself, and aim for a target moving at hundreds of miles per hour. No pressure. "Captain Chen, we have visual on the F-22, someone called out, confirming altitude match and speed synchronization. Sarah took a deep breath. Then another. Her hands were steady. Her mind was clear. Every hour of training, every flight, every simulation was coming together in this moment. 2 minutes, Patterson said. Depressurizing cabin now. The pressure change made Sarah's ears pop. The temperature dropped immediately. Even through the suit, she could feel the cold. The ramp mechanism began lowering with a mechanical whine. 1 minute. Sarah moved to the edge. Below and ahead, she could now see the F-22. It looked impossibly small from this angle, a silver dart cutting through the sky. The canopy was closed. Lieutenant Webb would be inside, unconscious or worse. 30 seconds. Position looks good. The ramp was fully open now. Wind screamed past, trying to pull Sarah forward. She gripped the safety rail and watched the F-22 grow larger as the C-130 closed the distance. Captain Chen, your go for jump on my mark, Patterson said. 10 seconds. Sarah's entire world narrowed to the aircraft below. Nothing else existed. Not the wind, not the cold, not the fear that had defined the last 5 years of her life. 5 seconds, 4, 3, 2, 1, mark. Sarah jumped. The first second was pure chaos. Wind slammed into Sarah with the force of a freight train, spinning her sideways. The world became a blur of blue sky and distant ground, rotating too fast to process. Her inner ear screamed in confusion while her training fought to take control. The heads-up display in her helmet flickered to life, showing her trajectory as a green line that curved wildly away from the F-22's position. Red numbers counted down the distance. 200 feet. 180. She was falling too fast and drifting left. Sarah forced her arms out, activating the suit's control surfaces. The fabric stiffened, catching air, and her spin began to slow. The horizon stopped rotating and settled into something approaching horizontal. Below and to her right, the F-22 continued its steady circle, unaware of the insanity happening above it. 150 feet. 120. She angled her body, arms adjusting in tiny increments. The suit responded sluggishly at first, then more precisely as her speed stabilized. The green trajectory line on her display began curving back toward the target. But she was still coming in too hot, too steep. 90 feet, 70. The F-22's canopy gleamed in the sunlight. Sarah could make out details now. The panel lines, the weapons pylons beneath the wings, the navigation lights. Lieutenant Webb was somewhere inside that cockpit, and she was about to try something no sane person would attempt. 50 feet. 40. She tucked her legs, reducing drag, letting gravity accelerate her descent. The distance closed faster. The F-22 grew from a toy to a real aircraft, massive and terrifyingly solid. 30 feet. Sarah spread her arms wide. Maximum control surface deployment. The suit caught air like a parachute, violently decelerating her. Her shoulders screamed in protest. The straps bit into her chest. But she was slowing, angling, coming in at almost the right trajectory. 20 feet. 15. The F-22's vertical stabilizers rose up to meet her like twin walls. She was coming in too far back, behind the cockpit instead of on top of it. No time to correct. Sarah reached out, fingers grasping for any handhold. 10 feet. 5. Impact. Her body slammed into the aircraft's spine with brutal force. Pain exploded through her ribs. The wind tried to tear her away immediately, pulling at her suit, her limbs, everything. Sarah's right hand found a panel seam and held on with desperate strength. Her left hand scrabbled across the smooth surface, searching for purchase. She was sliding backward. The wind was too strong. Her grip was failing. Then her left hand found the canopy rail. She locked her fingers around it and held on with every ounce of strength she possessed. Her body was pressed flat against the aircraft, wind screaming past her helmet. The F-22 continued its steady circle, completely indifferent to the woman clinging to its back. Chen to control. She gasped into her radio. "I'm on the aircraft." "Repeat, I'm on the aircraft. Copy that, Captain." Morrison's voice was jubilant. "Status?" "Bruised but functional. Moving to canopy access now." Moving was an optimistic word for what Sarah did next. Crawling would be more accurate. She pulled herself forward along the aircraft's spine, fighting wind that wanted to peel her off like a sticker. Every inch was a battle. Her muscles burned. Her injured ribs sent sharp pains through her chest with each movement. But she had done harder things. She had survived a fireball at 40,000 feet. She had watched her wingman die and kept flying. She could do this. The canopy was within reach. Sarah positioned herself carefully, one hand maintaining her grip while the other explored the emergency release mechanism. It was a covered panel on the left side of the canopy frame, designed to be accessible from outside in case of emergency ground operations. Chen to control. I'm at the canopy release. Attempting access now. Copy. Be advised, opening the canopy at this speed could cause structural stress to the aircraft. That's a risk we have to take. Sarah found the release cover and pried it open. Underneath was a T-handle painted bright red. She grabbed it with both hands and pulled. Nothing happened. She pulled harder. The handle moved a fraction of an inch, then stuck. Control, the release is jammed. Trying again. Sarah repositioned, bracing her feet against a panel seam for leverage. She pulled with everything she had. Her arms shook. Her vision started to blur from the effort. The handle suddenly gave way with a sharp crack. The canopy's mechanical locks disengaged. Immediately, the wind caught the edge of the canopy and tried to tear it away. Sarah held on as the canopy began to rise, fighting the airflow that wanted to rip it completely off the aircraft. Canopy opening. Repeat, canopy is open. The wind inside the cockpit was even worse. Sarah pulled herself forward and looked down at Lieutenant Webb. He was slumped in his seat, his helmet tilted at an angle that suggested complete unconsciousness. His oxygen mask was fogged. Whether that meant he was breathing or had been breathing, she couldn't tell. Control, I have visual on Lieutenant Webb. He's unresponsive. I'm going in. Sarah lowered herself through the opening. It was tight. Almost impossibly tight with both her suit and his flight gear. She had to position herself half on top of him, half wedged against the canopy frame. Her feet found purchase on the sides of the cockpit. Her hands reached for the controls. The stick was trapped between Webb's legs. The throttle was under his left arm. Sarah tried to reach around him, but the angle was impossible. She couldn't get proper leverage on either control. Control, I can't fly like this. I need to move Lieutenant Webb. Negative, Captain. Moving him could cause further injury if he's... I understand the risk, Sarah interrupted. But I can't control the aircraft with him in the way. We're 8 minutes from the red zone. What do you want me to do? Silence on the radio. Then Morrison came back on. Captain Chen, you are authorized to do whatever necessary to gain control of the aircraft. Medical will deal with the consequences. Sarah didn't hesitate. She reached down and found the seat harness release. 5-point harness, standard military configuration. Her fingers worked the mechanism while the wind howled around them. The harness came free. Now came the hard part. Webb was dead weight, and Sarah was wedged in at an impossible angle. She got her arms under his shoulders and tried to lift. He barely moved. The man was probably 180 pounds of pure muscle, and she was trying to shift him while fighting turbulence and her own awkward position. Come on, she muttered through gritted teeth. Come on. She repositioned, getting better leverage. Pulled again. Webb's body shifted a few inches. His head lolled to the side. Through his oxygen mask, Sarah thought she saw fog. Maybe. Possibly another pull. Webb moved more, sliding to the right side of the cockpit. There was barely enough room, but Sarah managed to wedge him between the seat and the canopy rail. It wasn't comfortable. It probably wasn't safe, but it gave her access to the controls. Sarah dropped into the seat properly for the first time. Her hands found the stick and throttle. The familiar shapes fit her grip like old friends. For a moment, she just sat there, feeling the aircraft around her, the subtle vibrations of the engines, the way the controls moved in her hands. Then she looked at the instrument panel and reality crashed back. Warning lights covered the display. Multiple systems were showing failures or degraded performance. The autopilot was still engaged, fighting her for control. And according to the navigation display, they were now 6 minutes from entering restricted airspace. Control, I'm in the seat. Beginning manual control takeover. Sarah's hands moved across the panel with practiced speed. She needed to disengage the autopilot, reset the security protocol, and regain full control of the aircraft, all while maintaining altitude and preventing the F-22 from entering airspace that would get them both killed. She reached behind the seat and found the security panel. Her fingers entered the 16-digit code she had calculated back at Andrews. The panel beeped once, twice, then a green light flashed. Security protocol reset confirmed, the computer's synthetic voice announced. Sarah immediately toggled the autopilot disconnect. The stick came alive in her hand, responsive and eager. The F-22 was hers now. Control, I have full manual control. All systems responding. Excellent work, Captain. Now get that bird out of the red zone. Sarah checked the navigation display. 4 minutes until restricted airspace. She banked the aircraft left, breaking out of the circular pattern. The F-22 responded beautifully, its massive engines pushing her back into the seat as she added power. Come on, baby, she whispered to the aircraft. Let's show them what we can do. She vectored away from the restricted zone, gaining altitude and speed. The ground fell away below. The city became a grid of streets and buildings, then a map, then just a concept far beneath her. For the first time in 5 years, Sarah Chen was flying again. And despite everything, despite the danger and the fear and the unconscious pilot wedged beside her, she felt a smile cross her face. She was home. The relief of having control lasted exactly 30 seconds before reality reasserted itself. Sarah had an unconscious pilot wedged against the canopy, a damaged aircraft with multiple system warnings, and she was flying over one of the most densely populated areas in the country. The immediate crisis was over, but the situation was far from resolved. Control, this is Chen. I need options for getting Lieutenant Webb medical attention. His condition is unknown, but he's been unresponsive for at least 20 minutes now. Copy that, Captain. We're working on extraction options. In the meantime, Can you assess his vital signs? Sarah glanced at Webb. His chest was rising and falling, shallow but steady. That was good. The fogging on his oxygen mask suggested he was breathing. She reached over with one hand, keeping the other on the stick, and pressed 2 fingers against his neck. A pulse weak but present, he's alive. Pulse is weak, breathing shallow. He needs immediate medical intervention. Understood. Captain, we have 2 options. Option 1 is you land the aircraft at Andrews with Lieutenant Webb still in the cockpit. We'll have medical standing by on the runway. And option 2? Option 2 is more complicated. We attempt a mid-air extraction, lower the aircraft to 5,000 feet, slow to minimum controllable speed, and we bring in a helicopter with the extraction team. They use a cable system to pull Lieutenant Webb out while you maintain steady flight. Sarah processed both options quickly. Landing with Webb in the cockpit would be difficult, but not impossible. She would have limited mobility, awkward control positions, and the constant worry that his body might shift and interfere with her flying. But it was the safer option. The mid-air extraction was insane, absolutely insane. It would require her to hold the F-22 at the edge of a stall, while a helicopter hovered feet away in turbulent air. One wrong move, one moment of instability, and the helicopter's rotors could strike the aircraft. Both crews would die instantly. What's the medical opinion on his chances if we wait to land? Sarah asked. There was a pause. Then a new voice came on the radio, crisp and professional. Captain Chen, this is Dr. Ramirez from Emergency Medical. Based on the symptoms described and the time elapsed, Lieutenant Webb likely suffered a cardiac event. Every minute without treatment decreases his survival chances. If we can get him to a hospital within the next 10 minutes, his odds improve significantly. 10 minutes. Landing would take at least 20, maybe more depending on traffic and approach vectors. Sarah looked at Webb's pale face. He was someone's son. Maybe someone's husband or father. He had woken up this morning expecting a routine training flight, never imagining he would end up fighting for his life at 15,000 feet. She had joined the Air Force to save lives. That was the whole point, wasn't it? Not just to fly, but to make a difference when it mattered most. We're doing the extraction, Sarah said. Set it up. Captain, are you sure? The risk, I'm sure. Get the helicopter in the air now. I'm descending to 5,000 feet, and will hold position at your designated coordinates. Copy that. Stand by for vectors. Sarah pushed the stick forward, beginning a controlled descent. The F-22 responded smoothly. Cutting through the air with the grace of a predator, she reduced power, watching her airspeed bleed off. The ground began rising to meet her, the city resolving into individual buildings and streets. Chen, this is Major Patterson in the C-130. I'm hearing chatter about an extraction. Please tell me you're not doing what I think you're doing. I'm doing exactly what you think I'm doing. That's suicide, Captain. The turbulence alone. Are you flying the extraction helicopter? No, that's Lieutenant Kim in a Black Hawk, but Chen, seriously, there are other options. None that give Lieutenant Webb the best chance of survival. Sarah checked her altitude. 8,000 feet and descending. Patterson, I need you to do something for me. If this goes wrong, make sure they know it was my decision. The mission planners, Morrison, everyone. This was on me. Don't talk like that. You're going to make it. Probably. But if I don't, I need that on record. Sarah leveled off at 5,000 feet. The air was thicker here, warmer, more turbulent. She could feel every pocket of unstable air as the F-22 moved through it. This was going to be challenging. Captain Chen, this is Lieutenant Kim. I'm your extraction pilot. Currently 5 miles south of your position and closing. ETA 3 minutes. Copy that, Lieutenant. What's your experience level with close proximity flying? Search and rescue specialist, 7 years. I've done mountain rescues in weather that would ground most pilots. But ma'am, I've never tried to pull someone out of a fighter jet mid-flight. Then we'll both be learning something new today. Sarah reduced her speed further, down to 220 knots. The F-22 didn't like flying this slow. The controls felt mushy, less responsive. She had to make constant small adjustments to maintain altitude and heading. With Webb wedged beside her, every movement was awkward. I have visual on the Black Hawk, Sarah announced. The helicopter was approaching from behind and below, its rotors visible as a dark blur against the ground. Captain, we're going to come up on your left side, Kim said. I'll match your speed and altitude, then move in close. My crew will deploy a cable with a rescue harness. You'll need to secure it around Lieutenant Webb and we'll winch him up. Understood. How close is close? About 10 feet between my rotors and your wing, 10 feet. in an aircraft traveling at over 300 kilometers per hour. With turbulence and 2 different flight systems trying to maintain stability, the margin for error was measured in inches. The Black Hawk rose up alongside the F-22. Sarah could see the pilots through the helicopter's windscreen, their faces intense with concentration. The side door was open, revealing 2 rescue specialists in safety harnesses. "Beginning approach," Kim announced. The helicopter edged closer. Sarah fought to keep the F-22 stable, making tiny corrections with stick and rudder. The 2 aircraft were like dancers trying to move in perfect synchronization, except the music was the howling wind and any misstep meant death. 5 feet separation, Kim called out.
Holding position. One of the rescue specialists deployed the cable.
It snaked down toward the F-22's cockpit, swaying in the wind. Sarah watched it approach, calculating angles and timing. She needed to grab that cable and secure it around Webb without losing control of the aircraft. "Webb is secured in position, but I'll need to release him to attach the harness," Sarah said. "That means he'll be loose in the cockpit. If we hit turbulence, he could fall against the controls. Can you brace him somehow?" Sarah looked around the cramped cockpit. "Not really. We'll have to risk it." The cable was almost within reach now. Sarah extended her left hand, keeping her right locked on the stick. The cable swayed past, just out of range. The rescue specialist adjusted, lowering it more. "Almost there," Sarah muttered. Her fingers closed around the cable. She pulled it into the cockpit and began securing the harness around Webb's torso. It was difficult work, made worse by the confined space and her awkward angle. She had to loop the straps under his arms around his back through the buckle. "Harness is attached," she announced. "Ready for extraction on my mark." "Standing by," Kim replied. Sarah took a breath. Once she released Webb, he would be entirely dependent on that cable and the helicopter crew. If anything went wrong, if the cable failed or the helicopter lost position, he would fall 5,000 feet. But staying here meant he would likely die anyway. 3, 2, 1. Mark. Sarah released her hold on Webb. The helicopter crew immediately began winching up the cable. Webb's body lifted out of the cockpit, rising slowly toward the helicopter. Sarah maintained her position, every muscle tense, watching the rescue unfold. Webb was halfway to the helicopter when turbulence hit. The F-22 dropped suddenly, caught in a pocket of rough air. Sarah's stomach lurched as she fought to regain altitude. The sudden movement caused the cable to swing wildly, Webb's body penduluming through empty air. "Stabilize, stabilize," Kim shouted. Sarah was already on it, correcting the aircraft's attitude and bringing it back to steady flight. But the damage was done. Webb was spinning on the cable, his unconscious body twisting in the wind. "Keep winching," Sarah commanded. "Don't stop." The rescue crew continued pulling Webb up. He was 20 feet from the helicopter. 15. 10. The specialist reached out, grabbing his arms and pulling him toward the open door. And then he was inside. "Safe. We have him," Kim announced. "Extraction successful. Breaking off now." The Black Hawk peeled away, dropping and turning toward the nearest hospital. Sarah watched it go, then slumped back in the seat. Her whole body was shaking from adrenaline and exhaustion. "Control, this is Chen. Extraction complete. Lieutenant Webb is en route to medical care." "Outstanding work, Captain," Morrison said. His voice carried genuine relief. "Now let's get you on the ground." Sarah looked at the empty cockpit around her. No Webb, no distractions, just her and the aircraft the way it was supposed to be. "Copy that, Control. Captain Chen requesting vectors for Andrews Air Force Base. Time to bring this bird home." The approach to Andrews Air Force Base was almost peaceful, compared to everything that had come before. Sarah flew the F-22 with steady hands, following the vectors provided by ground control. The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Below, the base spread out in organized patterns of runways and buildings. "Captain Chen, you are cleared for landing on runway 27, the tower controller said. "Emergency vehicles are standing by as a precaution." "Copy that, tower." "Beginning final approach." Sarah dropped the landing gear and adjusted her speed. The F-22 settled into its landing configuration with familiar groans and clicks. Every sound, every vibration was exactly as she remembered. This aircraft was a machine, but it was also an extension of the pilot's will. Right now it felt like an old friend welcoming her home. The runway rose up to meet her. Sarah flared the nose at precisely the right moment, feeling the main gear touch down with barely a bump. The drag chute deployed automatically, slowing the aircraft. She applied brakes smoothly, bringing the fighter to a controlled stop halfway down the runway. Tower, Captain Chen is on the ground. Aircraft secured. Welcome back, Captain. Sarah taxied off the runway toward the designated parking area. A crowd had gathered. Dozens of personnel waiting to see the aircraft that had been at the center of a crisis. As she approached, they began to applaud. The sound was faint through her helmet, but unmistakable. She brought the F-22 to a stop and began the shutdown procedure. Engines spooling down. Systems powering off. The canopy opening to let in fresh air that didn't taste of adrenaline and fear. Sarah removed her helmet and looked up at the darkening sky. 5 years. 5 years since she had last shut down a fighter jet. 5 years since she had run away from the one thing she was truly good at. A ladder appeared at the cockpit side. Sarah stood on shaky legs and climbed down. The moment her boots touched the tarmac, the waiting crowd erupted in cheers. Colonel Morrison was the first to reach her, his hand extended. Captain Chen, that was the most impressive piece of flying I've seen in 30 years of service. Sarah shook his hand. Thank you, sir. What's the status on Lieutenant Webb? The helicopter just reached the hospital. Early reports suggest he's stable. They're performing emergency cardiac procedures now, but the doctors say getting him to them when you did probably saved his life. The tension Sarah had been carrying finally began to release. Webb was alive. The city was safe. The mission, as insane as it had been, was a success. Major Patterson pushed through the crowd and grabbed Sarah in a hug that nearly cracked her already bruised ribs. That was absolutely crazy. I can't believe you actually jumped onto a moving jet. I can't believe it either, Sarah admitted. Ask me again in a few days when the adrenaline wears off. Davis, the technician who had helped her with the jumpsuit, appeared with a tablet. Captain, I need to get your feedback on the suit's performance. The data we collected is incredible, but we need your first-hand account for the official report. Later, Davis, Morrison said firmly. Right now, Captain Chen needs medical attention and rest. Sarah wanted to argue that she was fine, but her body chose that moment to remind her of the beating it had taken. Her ribs ached. Her shoulders burned from the impact and the strain of holding on to the aircraft. Her legs felt like rubber. Medical attention sounds good, actually, she conceded. They led her to a waiting ambulance where paramedics checked her over. Bruised ribs confirmed. Strained shoulders also confirmed. Minor cuts and abrasions from the equipment. Nothing serious enough to require hospitalization, but enough to make the next few days uncomfortable. You're lucky, one of the paramedics said, wrapping her ribs. That impact could have broken bones. I've had practice with rough landings, Sarah replied. While the medics worked, Morrison sat down beside her. Captain, I need to ask you something. That was a voluntary mission. You could have said no at any point. Why didn't you? Sarah thought about the question. Why had she agreed to something so dangerous? Why had she thrown herself back into the world she had spent 5 years avoiding? Because someone needed help, she said finally. And because I spent 5 years being angry at myself for surviving when my wingman didn't. I thought if I stopped flying, I could stop feeling guilty. But it doesn't work that way. The guilt doesn't care if you're in a cockpit or serving coffee. It's always there, and now I think maybe the guilt isn't something to run from. Maybe it's something to use. A reminder of why this matters, why we do what we do. Morrison nodded slowly. There's a reason I called you specifically for this mission, Captain. Yes, you had the technical knowledge we needed. But more than that, I read your file. I know what you've been through. I knew that if anyone could handle the pressure of this situation, it was someone who had already faced their worst nightmare and survived. Sarah looked at the F-22 sitting on the tarmac, its sleek form beautiful in the fading light. I used to think that crash broke me, that I was too damaged to fly again. And now I think maybe it just showed me what I'm really capable of when everything goes wrong. The next few hours were a blur of debriefings and paperwork. Sarah recounted every detail of the mission, while officers took notes and recorded her statements. The jump, the landing on the aircraft, the security override, the extraction. Every moment was documented for the official record. It was past midnight when Morrison finally dismissed her. You're staying on base tonight. We've arranged quarters for you. Tomorrow there will be more questions, probably some press interest. But tonight you should rest. Sir, about my status. I'm still technically a civilian. I left the service 5 years ago. Morrison smiled. Technically, yes. But Captain, the Air Force has been holding your commission in inactive reserve. We never officially discharged you, which means if you wanted to, you could reactivate tomorrow. The offer hung in the air between them. Sarah thought about the coffee shop, about Tommy and the regular customers and the simple life she had built. It was safe. It was predictable. It was everything flying could never be. It was also slowly killing her. "Can I think about it?" she asked. "Take all the time you need." Sarah was escorted to temporary quarters, a small room with a bed, desk, and bathroom. She showered, washing away the sweat and grime of the day. When she finally lay down, exhaustion pulled her toward sleep immediately, but just before she drifted off, her phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. "Captain Chen, this is Lieutenant Webb. They told me what you did. Thank you for saving my life. I owe you everything." Sarah stared at the message for a long moment. Then she typed back, "You don't owe me anything, Lieutenant. Just get better and get back in the cockpit. That's all any of us can do." She set the phone aside and closed her eyes. The next morning, Sarah woke to sunlight streaming through the window. Her body ached, but it was the good kind of ache, the kind that came from pushing herself beyond limits and succeeding. Her phone showed dozens of missed calls and messages. News outlets wanting interviews. The coffee shop asking where she was. Friends she hadn't talked to in years, suddenly aware of what had happened. And one message from Colonel Morrison. "Press conference at 10:00. Your attendance is requested but not required. Also, there's someone who wants to meet you. Hangar 7. Sarah checked the time. 8:30. She had 90 minutes. She dressed in the spare uniform that had been left for her and made her way across the base. Morning activities were in full swing. Aircraft taking off and landing. Personnel moving between buildings. The organized chaos of military life. Hangar 7 was on the far side of the flight line. As Sarah approached, she saw a figure standing outside, looking up at the sky. When the person turned, Sarah recognized Major Patterson. "Morning, Captain. Sleep okay?" "Better than expected." "What are you doing here?" Patterson gestured toward the hangar. "Thought you might want to see something before the circus starts." They walked inside together. The hangar was mostly empty except for one aircraft sitting in the center, bathed in overhead lights. The F-22 from yesterday. Sarah approached it slowly. In the calm light of morning, she could see the scuff marks where she had landed on its back. The scratches around the canopy from the emergency release. Battle damage from a battle that had nothing to do with enemy fire. "They're calling it the Miracle Jet," Patterson said. "The aircraft that survived impossible odds because of one crazy pilot who refused to give up. It wasn't just me. It was everyone. You, Kim, the rescue crew, all of it. True, but you were the one who jumped. You were the one who took control when nobody else could." Sarah reached out and touched the aircraft's skin. Cool metal under her fingers, solid and real and beautiful. "I missed this," she admitted quietly. "I missed it so much it hurt. But I was too scared to come back, and now I think maybe fear is just part of the job. You don't get rid of it. You just learn to fly anyway." Patterson smiled. "For what it's worth, I think you should come back. The Air Force needs pilots like you. Hell, the world needs people like you." Before Sarah could respond, her phone buzzed again. "Morrison. Press conference moved up. They're starting in 10 minutes. Are you coming?" Sarah looked at the F-22 one more time. Then she looked at Patterson.